So I'd love to have the panelists, before we dive into the topic, quickly introduce themselves.
Thank you, Kerry. Lovely to have you here. Excuse my deep voice. I'm having some allergies, but I think we're going to be okay. Before I introduce myself, I just want to do a quick shout out to the man on that side, Scott Peretti, who literally jumped on this panel about 5 minutes ago because poor Lizzy Pollott from Acast had her plane turned around over Greenland. Everyone's fine, but she could not make it. So thank you, Scott, for the quick fill-in. I'm Scott Klass. I'm CMO of SoundStack. We're a tech company for podcasts and radio. We're doing a lot of work with public media, including WBGO, including KUT is also an excellent partner. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
I'm Debbie Hiott. I'm the general manager of KUT and KUTX. So KUT is our NPR affiliated news station. We do a lot of local news. We have a newsroom, about 40 people. And then we have KUTX, which is our music station, which is, it's the most fun, frankly.
And I'm Scott Peretti, the fill-in. I'm the president of Cats Digital, and we have multiple digital assets that we bring to marketers and we sell that. On the podcasting front, we have 300,000 podcasts that we work with advertisers to help them activate, all these podcast audiences.
Scott, thank you again so much for joining us. We're trying not to give Lizzy too much FOMO. She is on her way, so she'll be here later.
Yeah.
That's good. That's the good news. Debbie, I'd love to start with you. I know I gave a little intro about what's happened to public media, but we've heard a lot about closures, layoffs, just a lot of immediate impact. So I'd love to hear what you've seen at your station.
Yeah. So, when you take $1 billion out of funding out of public media, you are going to see a lot of those things. Our station, we lost about $1 million in federal funding, which for us was only about 6% of our annual budget. We are fortunate. I mean, you see Austin, you know what Austin is like. We're fortunate to be in a community like this where we've had a lot of people to step up. But I will tell you that, this moment that we're in public media, it is, I hate to say it, it's cheesy, but it's the best of times. It's the worst of times. The worst part is over with in that they took that funding away. The best part is that this is the thing that is going to push our industry to really start to innovate more. A lot of stations are innovating. We like to think that we're one of them, but this is the thing that's going to get the whole system doing a lot more innovation around how we create a really sustainable future.
Can you share a little bit more about how you've changed internally? When you say innovating, what have you done in the meantime?
So we, about 6-7 years ago, we really made a shift, a pivot to more digital audience. And over time, what that has meant is, more than 250% increase in our digital, just our website audience, in 5 years. And then we used to do podcasts back then, but we did them kind of, you throw something up against the wall, and if it sticks, cool. If not, sometimes you let it linger for a long time. And last couple of years, we changed our strategy around that. We worked with PRX. We hired a manager of podcasts who has been really fantastic, Elizabeth McQueen. And what she and PRX did is they put together a real podcast strategy. And we're at the point where we have revenue related to that. And then the other thing that we've done is we've really, really leaned into events, especially, with the loss of federal funding. You kind of have the opportunity and the imperative to double down and show your community that, okay, we expect you to pay 100% for us now. So you've got to be there for the community and more relevant than ever. And so we've really put a lot into our event strategy as well.
You were just telling me that you have an event going on right now at South by, right? That's had a lot of good reception already.
Yeah. I mean, we do a mostly a locals kind of South by event at a beer garden here in town, Schultz Garden, north of the Capitol. And this morning it was 1 in, 1 out, which was pretty cool. It's nice to see people out there for that.
Yeah, it's great to see. I think public media has always been about that trust and community. So it's great to see the community step up so fast. Scott, I'd love if you could, we've thrown some numbers out there, but I heard you also have a great insight onto a study that might be able to set the stage for us a little bit more before we go deep into what's happening.
Yeah, for sure. So it's consistent with what Debbie was just talking about with regard to, thinking about new things you can do, innovations that are going to help in the situation. So the case study we did was with WBGO, which is the jazz station of New York. It's based out of Newark, but it's a famous, famous jazz station. And they, like many stations, were feeling the pinch and the cuts. And Steve Williams, who's the president, decided to sort of go out of the typical lanes of public media and start to embrace programmatic advertising, or advertising. Let's just say advertising in general, with the programmatic channel in particular, because when you're a small staff, you can employ programmatic. It's automated, it's scale, it's all those things. So it would help for smaller staffs, and they needed to figure out a way to make new money. It's the kind of, it's interesting. There was an article in Inside Radio about a week ago that talked about some of the things that public media is trying to do to weather the storm. And they talked about consolidation. They talked about cutting down staffs. They talked about a lot of different things. The one thing they did not talk about is ads. Right. So it's not even it's sort of not even in the field of vision of a lot of people. So happily it was for Steve Williams and BGO. They did this with some trepidation that the listening audience would not react so well to it, because as we all know, there's a tenor to the way public media, sponsored, sponsorships sound, they call it underwriting, what it sounds like, and it's not typical ads. So there was a bit of a fear factor there, and the spoiler alert is it actually worked really, really well for BGO. They probably got, out of the, however many hundreds of thousands of listeners that they have in the region, I think 20 people wrote into the station saying, "Hey, what's going on? This seems weird. This is not what we're typically used to hearing in public media." And, talking about trust, Steve Williams, who's the president of the station, responded to each one of those pieces of feedback himself. And he basically just explained, look, times are tough. If you need, if you need this content, you want to keep it flowing, then there are things we have to do that are off the beaten path that are going to help. And pretty much every person who wrote in and asked about this was just like, sure, it sounds great. Yeah, we're totally fine with that. So, yeah.
I love that. And in terms of that, we talked about the importance of trust and community, and you had that response from people that was negative. He obviously approached it going one-to-one, replying to those emails. But what else have you guys seen? And I'm curious, Debbie and Scott, obviously you can speak to about how to experiment with these new sources of revenue, but not lose that trust. Is it sending those individual emails? Is it putting out a public note? What else can you do to communicate to the problem? Because I assume everyone here knows what's happening, but maybe people have missed it and don't understand what's changing.
I think, I don't want to speak to your station or group or specifically for public radio, but I think there's more of a acceptance for ads in the podcasting space right now. I think there's a couple things converging. First of all, I think programmatic gets sometimes a bad rap. It's just a mechanism to be able to serve ads to a variety of different podcast content. I think the creative is getting better. So agencies are becoming much more conscious of how they advertise and take advantage of, on their behalf, the podcasting community and audiences to match what these different kinds of content is doing. So I think that's really helping. And I think that there's the listener, I know I feel this way when I hear an ad on my podcast, somebody's sponsoring that content. So somebody's getting paid to produce great content that I'm going to enjoy. So there's almost like a trade-off that I think the listener has. And from the advertiser's perspective, an affinity for that brand because they're on this content that I really am passionate about. So it kind of can work, full circle is the way that we see it. And a lot of our advertisers are starting to see that as well.
And I think the trick for us is really that we, unlike BGO, we do have a lot of, we do about $5.5 million a year in underwriting already. And so we've been, we have a team that's very focused on that. And what they have done for our podcasts is, last year We had our best year ever for podcast downloads. And mind you, we keep those podcasts very local. We're not trying for the big, huge numbers, but they, they are.
Our headphones died.
I don't know if that's my mic.
Oh no.
Okay.
Can you all still
All
hear
right.
us?
So
We're good. Oh my God, we're back.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
all right, cool.
He just had to wave his hand around a little bit.
That was interesting hearing
Yeah.
myself just drop out. So we do about $3.3 million or million downloads in a year. It's not a huge amount, but it's growing, and it is focused very much on our local audience. And our sales team has been able to turn that into about $250,000 a year in attributable revenue. And when I say attributable, it's not just the CPMs of the podcast itself. It's the on-air promos, it's the digital banners, it's the events that we have where we have sponsors. And so we have a group of businesses out there that really do want to sponsor our podcasts, and they want to create that affinity with our audience. So what we have to figure out with programmatic is, how do you mix those two? Because you can't go from that kind of affinity underwriting that we're doing, that both the audience and our local clients have gotten used to. You can't go from that to the more commercial advertising in the same moment. And so honestly, I'm looking for, and maybe Cats Digital will provide it. I'm looking for that really curated programmatic that has that different tone to it. The creative you're talking about.
Yeah.
And if I can jump in, the curation does exist in some different forms. One good example is private marketplaces, right? So then, if you wanted to create something that was just a set of advertisers that you deemed appropriate, that would work, then you can set that up. And I know that Lizzy was going to talk a lot about that, because Acast looks at
Right.
that a lot as well.
Yeah, I'd love if you could elaborate a little bit more about the recipe of success for programmatic advertising. Scott, I know you were sharing a little bit more how it's like, it's been with us for a while. It's not that big a deal. We get advertising, but how does it actually look internally? How does it look for someone like Debbie? Let's help Debbie out. What's step one?
I mean, I think one thing, just to pick up on a point that you were making, is that, and I sort of hearken back to the early days of programmatic. So I came from a company called Right Media, which some of you might know. You probably know, which basically invented programmatic and it started in display advertising. And when our company, Right Media, was getting bought by Yahoo, which it ultimately did, the top brass at Yahoo came to us and they were like, how is this not going to hurt our brand? All that sort of stuff. And Mike Walrath and I, he was the CEO, made sure to make the point that these are different ad products, right? I mean, there's what programmatic would do would not come in and overtake what you do. It should be looked at as a supplement to everything else that you're doing, including, direct and local and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's that's an important point. Then, in terms of the other, basics of programmatic, I mean, there's a lot to say. A lot of it is about creating relevance. And I think the more relevance you have, here again, you're building an environment that's going to be favorable to the listening, right? If they feel like it's like the publisher is working for them to create a more curated experience, then they're gonna stick with you. So that could be everything from contextual advertising to the curation that we're talking about, things like that. I don't know if you want to pick up.
Yeah, I think there's ways you can dip your toe in. I mean, I think that's what the marketplace has been doing. You as the publisher control that. You could screen the ad, you could figure out what's right for your specific audience. But I'll tell you, more and more, again, as a big podcast listener myself, you're conditioned to these ads now. Whether you listen to the BBC or whether you're listening to the Daily, you're starting to see these things creep in more, standard ads, let's say, and so it's not as jarring as I think it once was for podcast listeners to hear that. Now, I also think you got to protect your audience, because that's your bond. So you have to, I think that, I don't want to, I'm on the sales side. But I think that you want to do that. So there's ways to dive into that a little bit. There's ways to maybe set yourself where you only receive a certain category of ads, or or you pre-approve what the creative comes in. I mean, if you're going to dive into programmatic, you have to be willing to lean in a little bit. It's not going to be as you're customizing everything, but there is a middle ground that I think you can find. And I think most people, I've been at these podcast movement events for 10 years, and I used to come in and talk about like DAI ads, and they would throw tomatoes at my face, you know? So I've seen the marketplace kind of evolve and move. And again, I think the listener's on that journey too, where the expectations changing.
I'm wondering if it differs when it comes to being a local network. Like if a programmatic strategy differs on size of network. Because I know one thing, Debbie, you stressed is obviously your local, your community. The mics went out when you said, we don't go big, we go national. So I don't know if that's the mic saying that you should go big, but won't be too conspiratory. But I'm wondering again, if you, maybe Scott, you can share of like whether or not someone like Debbie should approach it versus differently someone like, I don't know, the BBC, that's a lot bigger of a company.
Well, I think that one of the benefits of programmatic is that it's sort of, and I'll nod to my friend Mike Resnick, who we talked about this. It kind of democratizes the ad game a little bit, right? So if you're not as big a player, and let's say, you don't have the wherewithal to connect to bigger brand advertisers and bring those dollars in consistently, this allows you to still be in the game, A, and B, it allows you to scale, right? It allows you to create scale. So where you like to build off of what you have. Programmatic is really an audience-based thing. It's not so much really about selling shows. So if your shows are sort of, they could be awesome, but they could not be like a top 5 show or something like that. You still have an audience. And in programmatic, you can extend that audience, right? So they could come in with their O&O, find lookalikes that look like their audience and access them elsewhere across the marketplace. So you're getting really both sides, the curated, the local, and the scale in that case.
Our company does a lot of educating to the buy side. There's still a good chunk of the buying public that doesn't know that you can activate in local markets for podcasting. They think it can only be a national play. So, what our company does is for people that want to advertise in Austin and have businesses in Austin and want to reach the Austin marketplace, we're able to buy through the scale of programmatic and aggregating up content within a marketplace to reach these localized audiences. So programmatic, it does enable that.
I'm curious, in the conversations that you're having, Scott, is there anything different you tell them about public media versus just another audio network outside of that ecosystem?
I think, like any good content, we lean into the passion people have for public media. I mean, it is a passion point. It is tied to the community. Everything about it is community centric. The reason you get $5 million by people like underwriting is because it's powerful within the marketplace. And probably in this market, you benefited from losing $1 million and it made you scrappier and better because people support it. So those are, there's advertisers that want to get in there and be part of that environment because it's so valuable. That's that healthy push and pull though, and I can respect the point Debbie's making. You don't want to open it up to everybody. You got to nurture that audience.
Yeah. And our mission is not just to serve our listening audience. It's also to serve our local businesses. It's part of, our mission is really around the health of our community. And that's one of the things, I mean, people talk a lot about, in public media, we have talked a lot about adding staff to our newsrooms because local newspapers have had to retract so much and there are fewer journalists. Well, the other thing that has happened is that local newspapers used to be the place that your local jewelers and your restaurants, your small businesses used to get their information out. But as those newspapers have become part of big, large chains, those small guys have just been forgotten and they have a hard time breaking in on their local market. And so with public media, that is one of the reasons we have focused very much on our local business clients, and I think if we could figure out a way that helps both them and the station, that involved programmatic, it might be an interesting conversation.
If I could just jump in, I think it's a fair point to make that WBGO agrees with that completely. And it's always local first. Local always comes first. So here again, it's not like he's saying, I'm just going to do programmatic now and screw the community.
It's got to be a mix. Yeah.
Yeah. And with local, it can again, to appeal to the smaller businesses. It could be way more curated, way more customized to that market.
I know, Scott, you were saying earlier about how we're so used to ads in podcasting now, and I totally get that. But I am curious about how we've seen it evolve in terms of making ads like less interruptive, more a part of the experience. I think one thing you kind of touched on is like maybe it doesn't feel as interruptive if it's a local podcast or local station, and then I'm hearing about a local business. I feel like that helps because it's like doesn't feel like, why is this brand here? But is there anything else you add about how it's becoming more integrated?
I think the nature of the ad is getting better. I mean, it's less, they're not just taking the radio ad and running it across podcasting. I think we're seeing, and we have a little creative studio that we, customize the creative to make it genre specific. So again, it's hard for us to do, as Scott was saying, we don't do by shows, we sell audiences, but we definitely will have some content more curated to, or the creative sound better in a true crime genre or a sports genre or a news genre. So we do try to make that a twist, and depending on what the environment like, it can be jarring if you're listening to something at a easier pace and a big ad comes in. So I think the marketplace has got much better about, and again, the advertiser wants that too, because they want to fit in with the environment and take advantage of that. So that's what's got about.
Did I interrupt you?
No.
Sorry. There's another cool example of this. I don't know if, did you watch, do you listen to the show Tetragrammaton? That's Rick Rubin's podcast.
I know of it, but I'll admit I haven't listened, but clearly I need to.
Yeah, so it's a great podcast. Does anyone, raise your hand, anyone listen to Tetragrammaton? Rick Rubin?
Y'all have homework to do.
Okay, good podcast. But the point is that he took a very interesting approach to ads. So it's not necessarily just like playing to it like a genre, like whoever he's talking to. He created this sort of unique, almost like a 50s style old announcers like version of every ad that he has. And he only has probably like 5 or 6 different sponsors. So it is very curated. But each one of those brands, whether it's Squarespace or something like that, they're one of them. It's that same sort of like antiquated sound. It sounds like old radio basically. And so like in every single ad sounds like this. And so it's like in its own way, that sort of creates that bond with the listener too. It's like if they're listening to that show, it's like, oh, I know I'm not going to hear an ad that sounds like this on any other freaking show out there right now. There's a lot of stuff.
It's like an inside joke, like community type of thing.
Yeah.
Or if you were just randomly listening to, you're like, what's going on? But if you consistently listen to it, you're like, oh, that's his thing.
Yeah. And and they're really funny. I mean, the ads themselves are really, really entertaining. So it's cool. You should check it out.
Can't wait to listen. I'd love, Debbie, if you could share some examples as well. You talked about the importance of local businesses being part of it. So are there any, I don't know if you want to call out any specific ads or businesses, but in general, how you've become, a part of it?
Yeah, so we have a local music podcast. Not a surprise in Austin. It's huge for both our quality of life and the economy. And Pause Play, we started it during the pandemic. Concept was, what happens to the live capital of the world when the music stops. And some of the sponsors we've had for that have been we have one called Handy Bands. And what it is it's a group of musicians who do handyman work in their, daytime hours. And they wanted to, have some affinity with the podcast because we talk a lot about musicians' needs and affordability and how that affects them. Yeah. And so anybody that's interested in, how the creative class in Austin is being pushed out by affordability issues is also going to be someone that's more likely to call a bunch of musicians to come, take care of their fence or their deck. And another one is that we had for a while was an apartment complex that is focused on musicians as their tenants. Nice. And again, it's that affinity both with the product and with the kind of listener that is going to be, doing those things.
It's got to be a fun apartment complex.
Yeah.
I would definitely hire those.
That's got to be a cool place.
I want to live there.
So
I love those examples. And so I know, Scott, you shared earlier about the, I guess, negative feedback that was received with ads. I'm curious, Debbie, are there any examples you could share about like positive feedback you've got from listeners with those examples or others?
What I do hear from listeners is that they sometimes, I mean, we get comments every time we bring new members in. They tell us why they're in, and among the things, I mean, it really surprises me coming from commercial media. Among the things they mention is that they hear their local businesses represented on the air. That's one of the reasons they support us. And I can tell you, in 20 some odd years in corporate media, I never heard anyone say, I love the work you do because of that car dealership ad that's on page 3.
Yeah.
So it's less of a call out on the individual. It's more like, you support my local business. You help my local business in the community.
If you started doing like sort of quote unquote regular produced ads, whether it's programmatic or otherwise, how do you feel like your listenership would react to that? Because you obviously know your listenership better than anybody.
The devil is always in the details. It is how it sounds, the curation, that Scott was talking about, and again, the relevance to the listener in terms of, is this something that makes sense for my community? And that's something we deal with. Honestly, we deal with that with our regular local underwriters. Sometimes there are folks that come into the market and talk to us, and we start to feel like this is not who we are and who our listeners are.
Mm-hmm.
So it would just be heightened, and we would want to protect the audience that way. I do think we would get some complaints. We have over time, as we have increased our on-air sponsorship for the broadcast, we have heard from more people that they're saying, "Oh, I hear more commercials now," and my response is always, "Well, we do this so that we can continue to provide these services," but I also ask, is it as many commercials as you would hear, commercials as you would hear if you went to the other stations? And their response is always, "Oh, no, it's nothing like that." So
Yeah, it's not like you're the problem. Like, it's like you're the bad guy. Scott, I would love to, I know you shared about different ad like creatives, like I imagine again, true crime has a different ad sound. Can you share any like examples of listener feedback from that?
So I don't have specific, we run a lot of localized, but national brands that we'll run. So I'm not getting personal feedback as a publisher about that. But what I would say is, I would say now almost half of the campaigns that we're running, hundreds of them, have some kind of attribution on them. So they're looking at whether it's foot traffic, drive to site, some kind of brand lift that's associated with it. And what's exciting is that it's always nervous when you sell a campaign and there's some level of somebody's judging it in some way. But what it shows is kind of what we know intuitively, that podcasting content really works for advertisers, especially if it's done right. So when we run those campaigns that are more native sounding to the content, I'll say they do perform well. But at the same token, when we're running could be the Geico ad, that's also performing well. So it's, the podcast audience takes action, and it's kind of how we all listen to it, right? You're keenly listening to it. And if it's your special content and ads run it, you're gonna likely take more action than you would in another environment.
Scott, anything you'd add on those like metrics for success that you're seeing?
I mean, similarly, I don't have like the data on hand. Like Lizzy had a shit ton of data. We'll have to ask her for that.
See that? I'm not as good as Lizzy.
We almost left her picture up.
Oh, that's nice.
So you're lucky. Yeah, you can put your picture in there. But I think some of this goes back to the nature of working with like, tech vendors that help you, that provide programmatic and things like that. And the levels of control that you can provide, right? So again, public media in particular, I mean, everyone needs a sense of control. With public media in particular probably needs more control based on everything you're saying. It's a different breed. So part of the benefit of working with technologies that provide those controls can really help, create that same kind of curation. So by means of example, one thing that we at SoundStack are rolling out shortly is a product that we aptly call Ad Control, which is just really like fine tuning mechanisms. It uses AI to help the publisher fine tune like where they're, what kind of ads should run, across their properties. And so the AI part can come in the form of like their transcripts. You could find certain words. And if you don't want, something about parties or like, whatever word like wouldn't be appropriate for your network, you could eliminate that. And it gets down to a very, very like fine, granular level. So things like that are always going to help us.
That's so interesting. That's what you're building now and coming out.
That's one of our new products coming out shortly.
And a point that I would make that we need to be cognizant of in public media is that the new audiences that we are reaching, really, they are new audiences. Our podcast audience is not the same as our on-air audience. We know there are
How are you able to tell that?
Well, a lot of it has been anecdotal. Our manager of podcasts does a lot of checking in with folks. A lot of it has been the fact that, people like, for example, we have one podcast that people don't necessarily associate with us as much as I would like them to, because they found the podcast and, when they hear that, oh, that's us, that sometimes there's a little bit of really.
What podcast is that?
It's called Black Austin Matters. And that's one of those issues where NPR and NPR affiliates have not always done a good job of reaching the entire audience in their communities. And we have that podcast in part because we want to create another avenue for that community and to provide them the information that we want and that they want, and people have found it, but they're not necessarily associating it with us. I mean, the good news is our mission is just to get the information out, and so it's getting there. But the bad news is they're not affiliating it, as much with us.
Is there anything you're doing? I'm curious if is there anything you're doing to change that? Like, is that a problem? Like, you want to solve?
We're doing some events around it. We have allowed the podcast to be used by another community radio station in the market, which has been great in terms of bringing more audience to it, but it has also created some confusion about, oh, is this our podcast or is it their podcast? So we're working through that.
How are audiences finding you said that because that's interesting. So it's maybe a different audience than what's listening on air versus how they're finding the podcast. How are they finding that then? How are you reaching that new audience? Is it these events? Is that where you're?
I think some of it might be the events. In that case, I think it's also that the hosts are very connected in the community, and that they're bringing in the right guests who are also getting the word out. And I think it's creating, Austin has an 8% African-American, 7 to 8% African-American population. It's not huge. It is, it's more than we're representing with our audience, which tends to be, if things are going well, Nielsen will tell us about 4% of our audience. But I think that the podcast is reaching people in a different way, in part because the guests and the hosts are reaching the community.
Well, as you learned today, I'm a guest. I could sub in anytime you need a guest for that.
We'll follow up on that. We talked a little about those metrics of success. Debbie, I'd love if you could elaborate on that. We talked about listener feedback that you get and kind of the anecdotal things that you're able to pick up on. But are there any other things that you're tracking right now that really are when you look a year from now, that you're like, we're doing okay, we're doing well?
Yeah, so we're tracking downloads, of course. We're tracking, the sponsorship revenue, which podcasts are local businesses interested in being affiliated with, because I think that also gives us a sense of where they see an audience opportunity. And when we create new podcasts, we are really being much more methodical about understanding who that specific audience is we're trying to reach coming in. I mean, on the airwaves, we want to reach everyone. We're not always doing that, and that's where our podcasts can help us. And so in our podcasts, that's where we're saying, okay, here's an audience we're not reaching well. we're not doing a good job with, and we want to look in those areas.
I'd love to reflect back. Also, I'm looking at this time. I'm like, I don't know what this clock is.
I was looking at
It's
that
wrong.
too.
So, but I think I'll end on time on a reflection. What's next question, and then I'll save a little time for audience Q&A. I hope we have time. So start thinking of questions.
We're going to put you on the spot if you don't have a question, Stacey.
I could come up with more questions, but would love to just do the what's next. If we were to have this conversation a year from now, what do you hope changes in the audio industry? And obviously speaking to the programmatic as well.
Well, one, I hope public media gets its funding back at some point. I think supporting public media. I think everyone is jumping in every way they can because people who love it really, really love it. So hopefully, future growth of public media. And I think there's also probably some points, not to bring up a hackneyed conversation, but points about AI and how this.
We didn't talk about AI until this very
Were you
moment.
hoping that I wouldn't bring it up?
No, I'm all about it. Please continue.
Yeah. No, I actually don't necessarily want to talk about it, but I think it's just, the idea of putting AI in its right place, right? Thinking about the right way to use it. I think that, we've done other panels. My colleague Matt did a panel with Bonneville about, 6 months ago in New York at the NAB show. Where Bonneville talked about one of their shows and how they put on specific disclaimers that say no AI was used in the making of this podcast. And I think you're seeing a lot of that now. So I think Steve Goldstein, I don't know if he's here, but he was talking about that in his website a couple of days ago too. So there's that side of it. There's the creative side where you want your listeners, whether it's ads or the content itself, to still trust. You still want to cultivate that trust. And so in that case, maybe being too heavy-handed with AI on the creative side might not be a good idea. Whereas looking at from the tech side, like I mentioned before, like that new product that we have and other things, if you could leverage AI in that way to actually help the audio publisher be more efficient with their own business, that's different.
Yeah. Or screen ads or allow Debbie the ability to see what's coming on and take advantages.
Yeah. So it's about the proper context, I think, for AI.
Yeah. And I would say that, iHeart uses the phrase, what is it, entirely human or all human? I can't recall, but I hear it all the time when I listen to an iHeart podcast. And I also appreciated what Bridget was saying before us about, people want that human connection, but using the tools is something that we need to do a better job of in public media. And I hope that we are further along on that. I also hope that a year from now, we in public media, that advertising revenue is a larger part of the conversation because it is not enough of the conversation. And some of us have been able to show that it is a successful part of, for us, underwriting is about 40% of our budget. And that's way more than that federal funding ever was. And if we could get some of the stations that have, relied 30% of their budget on federal funding to focus on the potential for, helping their local businesses, I think that would be a good thing for everyone.
Yeah, I think that response against the AI is like really the industry rallying around the curators, the creators that produce this content. So it's kind of nice to see that way. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's not good content, we don't have a business. I don't think there's a big, something crazy is going to happen in our space, but I think you're going to see a greater acceleration of the things in place. So the tools, the technology, the attribution things that are the advertisers seeing the value and spending more, committing more dollars to it, more localized podcasts. So I just think that there's a lot of things in that flywheel that's starting to pick up faster and faster. And I think people are starting to seize on everything that's in front of us right now.
Right. Well, let's talk about a year from now. We'll have Lizzy join too, but Scott, you're invited as well. It'll just be a bigger panel. Okay. I don't know exactly how audience Q&A works. Do we have amazing? Thank you. Do we have any questions? Don't leave me hanging. We have some brilliant people up there.
I think Stacey won this.
Oh.
That was great.
All right. Well, this was a great conversation. You can hang out with, oh no, we have a question. Sorry.
Oh, thank God.
Appreciate you.
Where's the bathroom?
Right.
Is it coffee?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Tanisha, and I have a podcast called 40s AF. My question is, there's a lot of companies when you were speaking basically around AI. There's one called a channel called Quiet Please, and there is an AI company I think it's called Inception that claims to churn out like I think 30,000 episodes or whatever a month, and they're making tons of money, so they say, and they have like over 400,000 subscribers. So, I mean, in terms of that, especially when I go to the shows that they have, they literally have like reviews like one, the ratings are like 1.9. Like, how is a company like that, if they're using AI and a lot of it is not really kind of in any type of depth, they're probably just very surface, topics. I think some of it was like Oprah on Ozempic and her journey and different things like that. How are they making money? Like, how are they, is it just because they have those 400 subscribers that are hanging on and then just people just throw the ads at them? Like, I don't,
Programmatic.
Yeah. I'm not an expert in that, but I think if people are producing content, and if it's efficient to produce, if it's cheap and it's out there and it's distributed, somebody's running an ad somewhere on that. So I don't know those specific companies that you're necessarily talking about, but I think that that's really up to the listeners, I guess, to decide. Is it whether it's non-AI created or AI created content? I mean, if that stuff can be distributed, some people might enjoy that content.
Yeah.
so is it solely you track advertisers solely because of the subscribership that you have in terms of like, they look at that as that equates to potential money and that's it? Like in terms of a podcast producer, is that what you should mainly focus on or focus on the content? Or does it have to be a balance in order to be able to attract advertisers?
I mean, to me, in the context of this conversation that we've had, which is really about engendering trust between the audio publisher and the listener, to me, like the last thing you said would be most appropriate, which is, it sounds like what you're describing. I don't want to use the term AI slop, but like that is a term that people use. And it sounds a little bit like that. It sounds like a company that's sort of gaming the system.
Yeah.
And you could do that. You can do that. But if you're trying to engender trust with the listener, that's not the way you're going to do it.
How the question is going to be how sustainable that is. I mean, because you see the AI slop in social media, that some of the social media platforms are really starting to figure out that they might have a problem there. And that will happen with the distributors, I think, of some of those AI slop type of podcasts too.
I mean, good content does win in the long run, right? That leads to building the audience, that leads to growing it, and that leads to, greater, attribution when advertisers look to run ads in your podcast.
I hope so. I've sort of bet my whole career on it. So
You'll be living in that apartment with the musicians here pretty soon.
I really appreciate that question. I'm excited to dive into that company. I agree with you guys that good content wins, though I think there are use cases of people who just want to consume information. Like it feels like you're just listening to a Wikipedia page, right? And there's like value to that. Like read Wikipedia, listen to Wikipedia, but then also you can enjoy the amazing content that you guys produce. Well, thank you guys again for listening. This was such a great conversation. Props to Scott for filling in last minute. Thank you, Scott, for making this happen. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.